Preston Cole slammed his champagne glass on the mahogany table and pointed straight at the maintenance closet on the security monitor. "That one," he laughed. "Invite the janitor, the black guy with the mop. Bring him to the Ashford Gala, and let's watch him drown." Julian Ashford leaned back in his chair, surrounded by laughter, and said the 5 words that would change his life forever. "Fine, consider it done." But what none of them knew, not Preston, not Natalie, not even Julian himself, was that Marcus King had been standing right outside that door, hearing every single word. And he wasn't going to run. He was going to show up. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss what happens next. The laughter hit Marcus King before he even understood the words. He was carrying a toolbox in one hand and a maintenance report in the other, walking down the executive hallway on the 40th floor of Ashford Industries. The air up here was different. It smelled like leather and money and the kind of cologne that cost more than his weekly groceries. Marcus didn't belong on this floor. He knew that. Everyone knew that. But the HVAC unit in Julian Ashford's private conference room had been acting up for 2 days, and the work order said urgent. So here he was. The door was cracked open about 3 inches. Just enough. "I'm serious, Julian." That was Preston Cole's voice. Marcus recognized it immediately. The loud, entitled tone of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. "You've got the biggest charity event of the year in 4 days, and you still don't have a date. That's pathetic, even for you." Marcus stopped walking. He didn't mean to eavesdrop. He was just waiting for a pause in the conversation so he could knock. "What about Natalie?" That was Derek Langston. "She's been practically throwing herself at you for months." "Natalie's too obvious," Julian replied. "Besides, I'm not in the mood for another socialite who spends the whole night talking about herself." "Then do something fun with it," Preston said. There was a shift in his voice, something sharp and mean creeping in at the edges. "Make it entertaining." "What do you mean?" "I mean, invite someone ridiculous, someone who has no business being at the Ashford Gala, someone who will walk in and immediately prove they don't belong." A pause. Then Derek laughed. "Oh, that's brilliant." "Like who?" Julian asked. Preston must have pointed at something, because the room went quiet for a second, then exploded with laughter. Marcus heard Natalie Vandermeer's voice cut through the noise, high and sharp like breaking glass. "Oh my God, the maintenance guy? Marcus, you cannot be serious." "Dead serious," Preston said. "Think about it. A janitor from the Bronx at the Ashford Gala. Black tie, $500 a plate dinner, senators and movie stars everywhere. And right in the middle of it, a guy who was unclogging toilets 6 hours ago. It writes itself." More laughter. Marcus felt his grip tighten on the toolbox handle until his knuckles ached. "Does he even own a suit?" Derek asked. "I've never seen him in anything besides that gray uniform." "He probably owns one suit," Natalie said. "The one he bought for his wife's funeral. If he can still fit into it." The room went cold. Even Preston seemed to hesitate for a half-second. But then someone snorted, and the laughter came roaring back, uglier than before. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. Lisa. They were laughing about Lisa. "And doesn't he have a kid?" Natalie continued, clearly enjoying herself. "A little girl? So he's a single dad, working maintenance, probably living in some tiny apartment in the projects. Can you imagine the photographers' faces when he shows up? They'll think he's the valet." "Natalie, that's terrible," Julian said, but he was laughing when he said it. That was the part that cut deepest. Not the cruelty of the words, but the way Julian laughed while pretending to disapprove. Like Marcus's dignity was a minor inconvenience between jokes. "I'll put $10,000 on him making an excuse," Preston announced. "Something about his kid being sick. No way he actually shows up." 20,000 says he shows up but leaves within the first hour, Derek countered. "Once he sees the room and realizes where he is, he'll bolt." "I've got $20,000 that says he doesn't even know which fork to use," Natalie added. "We'll have to watch him eat. It'll be priceless." "So, are we doing this?" Preston pushed. "Julian, are you in or not?" Another pause. Marcus waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Fine," Julian said. "I'll invite him. It'll be good for a laugh." "This is going to be the greatest night of the year," Preston said, and Marcus could hear the sound of glasses clinking together in a toast. Marcus stood in that hallway for 10 full seconds after the laughter died down. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from something hotter and more dangerous. He could feel it burning up through his chest and into his throat, pressing against his teeth like a scream he refused to let out. 2 years. He'd worked at Ashford Industries for 2 years. Every morning he showed up at 6 a.m., before anyone on the executive floor had even finished their first espresso. He fixed their heating when it broke in January. He repaired the plumbing when the bathroom on the 38th floor flooded. He rewired the server room at midnight on a Sunday because Julian Ashford had a Monday presentation and the system crashed. He did all of it without complaint, without attitude, and without ever once being late. And this was what he was to them. A punchline. A bet. A janitor from the Bronx who didn't know which fork to use. He thought about turning around, just walking back to the basement, clocking out, going home to Amara, and pretending none of this had ever happened. That would be the smart move, the safe move. But then he thought about his daughter. 6 years old. Big brown eyes that looked up at him every night, like he was the center of the universe. 2 weeks ago, she'd come home from school and asked him a question that had kept him awake ever since. "Daddy, are we poor?" He'd knelt down to her level, forced a smile, and said, "We have everything we need, baby girl." But she'd shaken her head. "Tommy at school said we're poor because we live in a small apartment and you fix things for a living. He said that means we're poor." Marcus had held her tight and told her that being rich wasn't about money. It was about love and family and working hard. She'd nodded like she believed him, but the look in her eyes told him she wasn't sure. Now, standing in this hallway with the laughter of billionaires still ringing in his ears, Marcus made a decision. He knocked on the door. The laughter stopped like someone had cut the power. Marcus pushed the door open and walked in, toolbox in one hand, maintenance report in the other. Julian was sitting at the head of the conference table, flanked by Preston, Derek, and Natalie. They all had champagne glasses. They all had the same startled expression, like kids caught stealing cookies. "Mr. Ashford," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. "Work order said the HVAC in this room needed servicing. I also have the monthly maintenance report for the floor." He walked to the table and placed the report in front of Julian. His hands were steady. He made sure of that. Julian recovered fast. Marcus had to give him that. The surprise vanished behind a smooth, practiced smile. "Marcus, perfect timing. I actually wanted to talk to you about something." "Sir?" Julian glanced at his friends. Preston gave a tiny nod. Natalie pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. "The Ashford Foundation is hosting our annual charity gala this Saturday at the Plaza," Julian said, his tone casual, friendly even. "Black tie event, very formal. We usually invite employees who've made significant contributions to the company, and your name came up. I'd like you to attend as my personal guest." The lie was smooth, professional. If Marcus hadn't heard the real conversation 5 minutes ago, he might have been genuinely honored. He looked at Julian, then at Preston, who was staring at his phone with exaggerated disinterest. Then at Natalie, whose eyes were bright with barely contained excitement. then at Derek, who was swirling his champagne like this was the most boring moment of his day. They were all waiting for him to stammer, waiting for him to make an excuse, waiting for the punchline to write itself. Marcus thought about Amara's drawing on the refrigerator, a crayon picture of him wearing a crown with wobbly letters underneath, "My Daddy, the King." "I'd be honored, Mr. Ashford," Marcus said. "What time should I be there?" The surprise on Julian's face was real this time. A flash of something, confusion, maybe guilt, before the mask slid back into place. "The car service begins picking up guests at 7. I'll have my assistant add you to the list." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the invitation." Marcus picked up his toolbox. "I'll take a look at that HVAC unit now, if that's all right." "Of course. Go ahead." Marcus walked to the far side of the room, opened the maintenance panel, and began working on the unit. Behind him, the group was silent. He could feel their eyes on his back like heat from an open flame. It took about 45 seconds for them to start whispering. "He actually said yes," Derek murmured.
"I told you this was going to be good," Preston whispered back.
"Did you see his face?" Madeline hissed.
"He has no idea what he's walking into."
Marcus heard every word. He kept his back turned, his hands moving mechanically through the repair work, and he let them talk, let them laugh, let them think they had won. When he finished the repair, he packed up his tools, nodded politely to the group, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. He made it to the stairwell before his legs gave out. Marcus sat on the concrete steps, 4 flights above the basement where he spent most of his working life, and pressed his palms against his eyes. The anger was still there, hot and liquid, but now it was mixed with something else. Shame. The deep, old kind that lived in his bones. The same shame his father had carried, and his grandfather before that. The shame of being looked at and seen as less. His phone buzzed. A text from his grandmother. "Grandma Dolores. Picking Amara up from school. She says she wants spaghetti for dinner. You coming home on time tonight?" Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Yes, ma'am, home by 6. And Grandma, I need to talk to you about something tonight." He stood up, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and walked down to the basement. The maintenance room was small and gray and smelled like machine oil. Marcus's locker was in the corner, covered with photos of Amara, at the park, at her kindergarten graduation, on his shoulders at Coney Island. Next to the photos was a laminated card with his class schedule for the engineering program at City College, and below that, a picture of Lisa. She'd been gone 3 years now, a drunk driver on the Cross Bronx Expressway. Amara had been 3 years old. Marcus had been 29, suddenly alone with a mortgage he couldn't afford, a daughter who cried for her mother every night, and a grief so heavy he sometimes couldn't breathe. He'd sold the house, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx with his grandmother, who had come up from Alabama to help. He'd taken the maintenance job at Ashford because it was steady, had benefits, and let him go to night school. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what he'd dreamed of when he was younger, but it kept food on the table and a roof over Amara's head, and that was enough. Until today. Today, enough didn't feel like enough anymore. He pulled out his phone and called Ray. Ray Thompson picked up on the second ring. "What's good, brother?" "I need a favor." "Name it." "You still know that tailor, the Nigerian guy in Brooklyn who does the custom suits?" "Mr. Okafor." "Yeah, I see him every other week. Why? You got a wedding or something?" "Something like that." Marcus paused.
"Ray, I got invited to the Ashford Foundation Gala. This Saturday. Black tie at the plaza."
Silence on the other end. Then, "The Ashford Gala? That's the one where they had Jay-Z perform 2 years ago? That gala?" "That's the one." "How did you get—" "Wait." Ray's voice changed. He'd known Marcus since they were 12 years old, running the same blocks in the South Bronx. He could read Marcus's silences better than most people could read words. "Something happened." What aren't you telling me? Marcus told him everything. The conversation he overheard, the betting, the laughter about Lisa, the way they talked about him like he was an animal they'd brought in from the street for entertainment. Ray was quiet for a long time after Marcus finished. When he spoke, his voice was low and tight with controlled fury. Tell me their names. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. These people laughed about Lisa. They laughed about your daughter. They think you're a joke. So tell me their names, Marcus, because I want to know exactly who we're about to embarrass. We? You think I'm letting you walk into that ballroom alone? Nah, brother. I can't go with you, but I'm going to make sure you walk in there looking like you own the building. Like you own every building on that block. Mr. Okafor owes me a favor. My cousin Keisha does styling for GQ, and I've been cutting hair for 30 years. Your fade is going to be so sharp it could cut glass. Marcus closed his eyes. Ray, I've got $2,100 in savings. That's Amara's emergency fund, and my tuition money. Did I ask you about money? I said I've got favors to call in. You just show up and trust me. I can't let you... Marcus. Ray's voice was firm. You remember what your grandmother used to say? At the church picnic every year? You belong wherever you plant your feet and stand tall. That's right. So we're going to plant your feet in that ballroom, and you're going to stand taller than every one of those silver spoon sons of, well, you know. Now are you in or are you out? Marcus looked at the photo of Lisa on his locker door. She was laughing in the picture, her head thrown back, Amara balanced on her hip. She'd always been the brave one in their marriage, the one who walked into any room like she owned it, who never apologized for taking up space, who told Marcus every single day that he was better than he thought he was. I'm in, he said. That's what I thought. Meet me at the shop tomorrow after your shift. And Marcus? Yeah? These people think they know how this story ends. They don't. Marcus hung up and sat in the quiet of the maintenance room for a few more minutes. Then he grabbed his jacket, clocked out, and headed home. The subway ride from Midtown to the Bronx took 45 minutes. Marcus usually spent it reading his engineering textbook or listening to lectures on his phone. Tonight he just sat there, watching his reflection in the dark window as the train rattled through the tunnel. The man looking back at him was 32 years old, with hands that were always a little rough, no matter how much he washed them. He was wearing gray work pants and a navy polo with the Ashford Industries logo on the chest. He looked exactly like what he was, a working man at the end of a long day. Nothing special, nothing threatening, nothing worth noticing. But those people up on the 40th floor had noticed him, not as a person, as a joke, and that was worse than being invisible. The apartment was warm when he walked in. He could hear Amara's voice from the kitchen, talking a mile a minute about something that happened at school, and his grandmother's voice answering with the patient musical rhythm that had been the soundtrack of Marcus's childhood. "Daddy!" Amara launched herself at him the second he came through the door. He caught her and swung her up onto his hip, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like crayons and apple juice. "Hey, baby girl, how was school?" "Good. We learned about planets. Did you know Jupiter is so big that all the other planets could fit inside it? Even Earth." "Even Earth? That's pretty big." "And Miss Rodriguez said I have the best handwriting in the whole class. She put my paper on the wall." "That's my girl." He kissed her forehead and set her down. "Go wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready." Amara ran off, and Marcus walked into the kitchen where his grandmother was stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce. Dolores King was 78 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and the strongest person Marcus had ever known. She'd raised 4 children in rural Alabama, buried a husband, moved to New York to help her grandson raise his daughter, and never once complained about any of it. "You're late," she said without turning around. "Stayed to finish a job." "Mm-hmm." She turned to look at him, and her eyes, sharp and knowing behind her glasses, studied his face for a long moment. "Something's bothering you." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." He told her. Not the sanitized version, the real one. Every word he'd overheard, every laugh, every bet. When he got to the part about Natalie's comment about Lisa's funeral, Dolores set down her spoon and gripped the edge of the counter. "Say that again," she said quietly. "She said the only suit I probably own is the one I bought for Lisa's funeral." Dolores was silent for a long time. When she turned around, her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set in that way Marcus recognized from a lifetime of watching her face down trouble. "And you accepted this invitation?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Marcus blinked.
Good? Your grandfather, God rest him, was the finest tailor in Selma, Alabama. White men used to come to his shop because nobody in the county could cut a suit like James King. They'd shake his hand in the fitting room and cross the street to avoid him in public. But every Sunday, he'd put on his best suit, walk into church with his head high, and sit in the front pew like he owned the building. She wiped her eyes. "You know what he used to say? A man's clothes don't make him, but the right clothes remind him who he already is." "That's right." Dolores pointed the spoon at him. "So you're going to that party, and you're going to stand tall, and when those people look at you, they're going to see James King's grandson, and they're going to understand something they should have learned a long time ago." "What's that?" "That you don't get to decide what another man is worth." Amara came running back into the kitchen with wet hands and a drawing she'd made at school. Daddy, look, I made this for you. Marcus took the paper. It was a crayon drawing of a tall figure in a black outfit with something yellow on his head. Next to the figure was a smaller one, with big brown circles for eyes and a wide smile. "That's you and me," Amara explained. "You're wearing a fancy suit and a crown because you're a king. Like our last name, King." She'd written at the bottom in her careful first-grade handwriting, "My Daddy, the King." Marcus stared at the drawing. His throat closed up. He pulled Amara onto his lap and held her tight. "Daddy, are you okay?" "I'm perfect, baby girl." "Then how come your eyes are wet?" "Because sometimes daddies get happy tears." Amara considered this. "Can I have more spaghetti?" Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the first one since that hallway. "Yeah, baby, you can have more spaghetti." Later that night, after Amara was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Marcus stood in front of the refrigerator. He'd taped Amara's drawing right in the center, next to her kindergarten photo, and a coupon for laundry detergent. "My Daddy, the King." He touched the edge of the paper with his finger. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Ray. "Marcus, tomorrow, after my shift, I'll be there." Ray, "Already called Mr. Okafor. He's ready. We're going to make history, brother." Marcus put his phone away and looked at the drawing one more time. In 4 days, he would walk into a room full of billionaires who expected him to be their entertainment. They expected him to stumble, to stammer, to prove that he didn't belong. They had no idea who they were dealing with. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, but sleep didn't come for a long time. He lay in the dark, listening to Amara's soft breathing from the next room, and he made a promise, not to himself, but to her. He would walk into that ballroom. He would hold his head high, and he would show his daughter, and everyone else, that Marcus King answered to no one but God and his own conscience. The game had started, and they had picked the wrong man to play with. Marcus clocked out at 4:15 the next afternoon and took the 2 train straight to Harlem. Ray's barbershop sat on the corner of 125th and Lenox, wedged between a Dominican restaurant and a laundromat. The sign out front read, "Thompson's Classic Cuts, since 1998.
in gold letters that were starting to peel. But the shop itself was immaculate. Ray ran it the way he ran everything in his life, with precision, pride, and zero tolerance for nonsense. The bell above the door jingled when Marcus walked in. 3 barber chairs, all occupied. A waiting area with leather seats and a flat screen playing ESPN. The smell of aftershave and hot clippers.
This place had been Marcus's second home since high school, back when Ray was just learning to cut hair in his mother's kitchen, and Marcus was his first customer. Ray spotted him from across the room and held up one finger. He was finishing a lineup on a young man who looked like he might be a college athlete. Ray's hands moved with the kind of confidence that only comes from 30 years of practice. Quick, exact, almost musical. "Give me 2 minutes," Ray called out. Marcus nodded and sat down. He was still wearing his Ashford Industries polo, and he noticed a couple of the other customers glance at her with mild curiosity. He suddenly felt very aware of who he was in this moment. A maintenance man, about to ask his best friend to help him pretend to be something he wasn't. No, that wasn't right. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. He was showing up as himself, in a room that had been designed to exclude him. There was a difference. Ray finished with his client, collected his payment, and walked over to Marcus. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, looking at Marcus with that focused expression he got when he was sizing something up. "Stand up," Ray said. "What?" "Stand up. Let me look at you." Marcus stood. Ray walked around him slowly, studying him like a sculptor examining a block of marble. 6'2", broad shoulders. "You've been working out?" "I carry heavy equipment up 40 flights of stairs every day. Does that count?" "It counts," Ray nodded to himself. "Okay, here's what we're working with. You've got the build, you've got the face. What you don't have is the presentation. But that's why God invented barbers and tailors." He checked his watch. "Mr. Okafor is expecting us at 6. We've got time. Sit down. Let's talk strategy." Marcus sat back in the barber chair, and Ray draped a cape around his shoulders. But instead of picking up the clippers, Ray leaned against the counter and folded his arms. "I've been thinking about this all night," Ray said, "and I need to ask you something before we go any further." "Go ahead." "What's your end game? You walk into that ballroom, you look great, you impress some people. Then what? Monday morning you're back in the basement fixing pipes? These people are still rich. You're still you. So what's the point?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He'd been asking himself the same question. "You remember when Amara asked me if we were poor? You told me about that. Broke my heart. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I realized something. It's not the question that bothered me. It's the fact that I didn't have a good answer. I told her being rich isn't about money, but that felt like a lie. Because in this world, money is how people decide what you're worth. And Saturday night, I'm going to walk into a room full of people who've already decided I'm worth nothing." Marcus looked at Ray in the mirror. "The point isn't to impress them. The point is to prove to myself, and to Amara, that their math is wrong." Ray stared at him for a long time. Then he picked up the clippers. "That's a good enough reason for me. Now hold still. We're going to give you the sharpest fade the Plaza Hotel has ever seen." For the next 45 minutes, Ray worked in focused silence. He was meticulous. Every line precise, every angle deliberate. He shaped Marcus's hair with the attention of an artist, blending the sides into a clean fade that made Marcus's jawline look like it was carved from stone. He edged the hairline with surgical precision, cleaned up the beard into something neat and defined, and finished with a hot towel and aftershave that smelled like cedar and confidence. When Ray spun the chair around to face the mirror, Marcus barely recognized himself. "There he is," Ray said quietly. "There's the man they're not expecting." Marcus touched his jaw.
The man in the mirror looked sharper, more defined, more intentional, like someone who made decisions instead of following orders. Now let's go see Mr. Okafor about a suit. They took the A train to Brooklyn. Mr. Okafor's shop was on a side street in Bed-Stuy, a narrow storefront with bolts of fabric visible through the window and a hand-painted sign that read, Okafor and Sons, Fine Tailoring. The man himself was waiting at the door when they arrived, a tall, elegant Nigerian in his 60s, with gray temples and measuring tape draped around his neck like a stethoscope. "Raymond, my friend," Mr. Okafor said, embracing Ray warmly. "And this must be your brother, who needs a suit in 4 days." 3 days, actually, Marcus said. The gala is Saturday. Mr. Okafor raised an eyebrow. 3 days for a bespoke suit. You know, most of my clients wait 6 weeks. Most of your clients aren't in a hurry, Ray said. This one is, and I'm calling in that favor you owe me. Mr. Okafor studied Marcus for a long moment, the way Ray had studied him earlier, measuring not just his body, but something deeper. "Come inside. Let me see what we're working with." The shop was small but organized with military precision. Fabric samples lined one wall. A sewing machine sat on a heavy wooden table. Photographs covered the opposite wall. Mr. Okafor with musicians, athletes, actors, all wearing suits that made them look like they'd been born in them. "Take off your shirt," Mr. Okafor said, pulling out a measuring tape. Marcus hesitated, then pulled the Ashford polo over his head. He was wearing a white undershirt beneath it, and he was suddenly self-conscious about the calluses on his hands, the small scar on his left forearm from a pipe that burst 2 years ago. Mr. Okafor didn't seem to notice any of that. He was already measuring chest, shoulders, arms, waist, inseam, calling out numbers to himself in a low murmur and jotting them on a notepad. "You have a good frame," Mr. Okafor said. "Strong, athletic. The suit will hang well on you." He paused, his tape measure across Marcus's shoulders. "Raymond tells me you are going to an event where people expect you to fail." "That's one way to put it." "In my country we have a saying, 'The eagle does not catch flies.' It means a great man does not concern himself with small insults. But there is another saying I prefer." Mr. Okafor looked Marcus in the eye. "A man's garment does not make him, but the right garment reminds him who he already is." Marcus felt a chill run through him. His grandmother had said almost the exact same thing, quoting his grandfather. "Your grandfather was a tailor?" Mr. Okafor asked, reading something in Marcus's expression. "In Alabama. James King. He had a shop in Selma." "Then this is in your blood." Mr. Okafor smiled for the first time. "I will make you something worthy of James King's grandson. Black wool, clean lines. But here," he held up a piece of gold silk. "The lining, just a whisper of something extraordinary. When you move, when you turn, people will catch a glimpse of gold. They won't know why they can't stop looking at you. But we will know." "How much?" Marcus asked, because he had to ask. Mr. Okafor waved his hand dismissively. "Raymond called in a favor. That is how we do things. You pay me back by walking into that room and making every man in a $10,000 suit look ordinary." Ray clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "I told you, we've got this." "Come back Thursday evening for the fitting," Mr. Okafor said, already pulling bolts of fabric from the shelf. "Bring the shoes you plan to wear. And Marcus, stand straight when you walk. Not stiff, straight. Like a man who has nothing to prove, but proves it anyway." On the subway ride home, Marcus sat next to Ray in silence. The train was crowded with the usual evening rush. Nurses heading to night shifts, construction workers heading home, teenagers with backpacks and headphones. Normal people living normal lives. Marcus had always felt comfortable in this world. It was his world. "You're thinking too hard," Ray said. I'm thinking about what happens when I walk into that room and everyone knows I don't belong there.
See, that's where you're wrong.
Ray turned to face him.
You think belonging is something other people give you permission to do. It's not. Belonging is a decision. You decide you belong, and then you walk in like you decided it. That's the whole secret.
Is it that simple?
It's that simple and that hard. But you've been doing it your whole life, Marcus. You walked into a college classroom as a 26-year-old maintenance worker and got the highest grade in the class.
You walked into parent-teacher conferences where every other parent have a spouse, and you showed up alone and asked better questions than any of them. You've been belonging in rooms that weren't built for you since the day you were born. Saturday is no different. Marcus looked at his friend. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just never listen. Marcus got home at 8:30. Amara was already in her pajamas, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of milk and a serious expression on her face.
Daddy, Grandma said you're going to a fancy party.
Marcus shot a look at Dolores, who shrugged innocently. The child asked where you were. I told her. Yes, baby. Daddy's going to a party on Saturday night.
What kind of party?
A very fancy one, with music and dancing, and people in nice clothes.
Are you going to dance?
Maybe.
But you don't know how to dance, Daddy.
Dolores let out a laugh that she tried to cover with a cough. Marcus gave her another look. I'll figure it out, he said.
I can teach you, Amara announced. Miss Rodriguez taught us a dance for the spring show. It's called a waltz. You go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. She slid off her chair and held out her arms in a surprisingly proper dance position. Come on, Daddy, I'll show you.
Marcus looked at his grandmother. Dolores was smiling with her whole face.
Well, she said, the girl's offering to teach you. Don't be rude.
So Marcus took his daughter's hands, and in the small kitchen of their Bronx apartment, with the sound of traffic outside and the refrigerator humming, Amara taught him to waltz. She was patient and bossy in equal measure, counting out the rhythm and correcting his footwork with the authority of someone who had been dancing her entire life instead of 3 weeks.
1, 2, 3, Daddy, not 1, 2, 4. You're adding extra steps.
Sorry, baby.
And stand up straight. Miss Rodriguez says posture is everything.
Yes, ma'am. They danced for 20 minutes. By the end, Marcus could move through the basic steps without looking at his feet, and Amara had declared him almost ready.
You need more practice, she said seriously, but you're getting better.
Thank you, Professor. After Amara went to bed, Marcus sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop. He had 3 days to prepare for a world he'd only seen through windows and on screens. He started researching. The Ashford Foundation Gala. The charity focused on STEM education for underprivileged youth. Marcus read through their annual reports, their press releases, their list of board members and major donors. He studied the guest list from previous years. Senators, Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrities. He read articles about formal dining etiquette, about making small talk at charity events, about the unwritten rules of the wealthy elite. Then he pushed the laptop aside and opened his engineering textbook. Because here was the thing nobody on that 40th floor knew about Marcus King. He wasn't just a maintenance worker. He was 6 months away from an engineering degree that he'd been working toward for 3 years, attending night classes after full shifts, studying on the subway, writing papers at the kitchen table after Amara fell asleep. His GPA was 3.8. His professors had told him he had a natural gift for systems thinking, the ability to see how complex pieces fit together and find solutions that others missed. Just last month, he'd noticed a problem with the HVAC system at Ashford Industries that the company's own engineering team had overlooked. The system was losing efficiency because of a design flaw in the ductwork on floors 35 through 40. Marcus had calculated that fixing it would save the company roughly $2 million a year in energy costs. He'd written up a proposal and submitted it through the proper channels, but he'd never heard back. It had probably been buried under a pile of paperwork, dismissed because it came from a maintenance worker instead of someone with a corner office. He'd bring it up Saturday night if the opportunity arose. Not to show off, just to remind them that intelligence doesn't come with a dress code. Thursday evening, Marcus went back to Mr. Okafor's shop for the fitting. When the tailor brought out the suit, Marcus stood very still. It was beautiful. Not flashy, not loud. Beautiful the way a well-built bridge is beautiful. All structure and purpose and clean lines. The black wool had a subtle depth to it that caught the light differently when it moved. And the gold lining, just visible at the cuffs and when the jacket was unbuttoned, gave it something regal without being ostentatious. "Try it on," Mr. Okafor said. Marcus put on the shirt first. Crisp, white, fitted perfectly. Then the trousers, which broke exactly right over the shoes Ray's cousin Keisha had brought by that morning. Polished black leather, classic, borrowed from a fashion closet. Then the jacket. Mr. Okafor turned him toward the mirror. Marcus stared. The man looking back at him was a stranger, and himself at the same time. The suit transformed his frame into something commanding. His shoulders looked broader, his posture naturally straighter. The gold lining flashed when he moved, just as Mr. Okafor had promised. A whisper of something extraordinary beneath the surface. "My God," Ray said from the doorway. He'd come to watch the fitting, and he was standing with his arms crossed and his eyes wide. "Brother, they are not ready for you." "Small adjustments," Mr. Okafor murmured, pinning the jacket at the waist. "Here and here. I'll have it finished tomorrow evening. You'll pick it up by 6. Marcus kept staring at the mirror. He thought about what Amara would say if she could see him. He thought about what Lisa would say. "Mr. Okafor," he said quietly, "thank you." "Don't thank me. Go and make James King proud." Friday night, Marcus laid everything out on his bed. The suit, pressed and perfect. The shirt, the shoes, the tie, black silk, simple. Keisha had also sent over a watch, a vintage piece with a leather band that looked expensive but tasteful. "Just don't lose it," she'd texted. "It's worth more than your apartment." Amara stood in his doorway in her nightgown, watching him with big eyes. "You look like a prince, Daddy." "I haven't put it on yet, baby girl." "I know, but you will tomorrow, and you're going to look like a prince." He knelt down to her level. "Amara, can I tell you something?" "What?" "Daddy is a little nervous about this party." Her eyebrows went up. "You're nervous? But you're a grown-up. Grown-ups don't get nervous." "Sure we do. We just don't always show it." "Why are you nervous?" He thought carefully about how to answer. "Because there will be a lot of people there who have a lot of money. And sometimes people with a lot of money think they're better than people who don't have as much." Amara frowned. "That's dumb." "Yeah, it kind of is. Miss Rodriguez says the most important thing is being kind, not being rich." "Miss Rodriguez sounds like a smart lady." "She is. She's the smartest person I know." Amara paused. "After you and Grandma." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "I want you to know something, baby girl. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what anybody says about Daddy, I need you to remember that your father is a good man. Okay?" "I already know that, Daddy." "I know you do. I just needed to say it out loud." Dolores appeared behind Amara and put her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Time for bed, little one. Your daddy needs his rest." After Amara was tucked in, Dolores came back to Marcus's room. She looked at the suit laid out on the bed, and something shifted in her face. Pride, grief, memory, all tangled together. "Your grandfather would have approved of that suit," she said. "You think so?" "I know so. He always said the same thing about his work. I'm not just making a suit, I'm making armor. That's what this is, baby. Armor. You wear it tomorrow, and you remember that you've got James King's blood in your veins, and Lisa watching over you, and the little girl sleeping in the next room who thinks you hung the moon. She kissed him on the forehead the same way she'd done when he was 10 years old and scared of thunderstorms. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Marcus lay awake for a long time after she left, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the Bronx at night. Sirens in the distance, music from a car passing by, the rattle of the elevated train. Tomorrow he would leave this world and step into another one, a world that had been built specifically to keep people like him out. He closed his eyes and saw Amara's drawing on the refrigerator. My daddy, the king. He fell asleep, holding on to that image like a shield. Saturday came the way all reckoning days come. Too fast and too slow at the same time. Marcus spent the morning doing what he always did on weekends. He made pancakes for Amara, helped her with a coloring project, took her to the park on the corner where she ran circles around the jungle gym, while he sat on a bench pretending to read the newspaper. But his mind was already at the plaza, already in that ballroom, already standing in front of people who expected him to crumble. At 4 o'clock, he started getting ready. He showered, shaved carefully, and put on the white shirt first. The fabric felt different from anything he'd ever worn, smooth and fitted, like it had been poured onto his body instead of pulled over it. Then the trousers, then the shoes, which he'd polished twice that morning, until they reflected the ceiling light. Then the jacket. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tied the black silk tie with hands that were steady, even though his heart was beating double time. He fastened Keisha's vintage watch to his left wrist. He buttoned the jacket, then unbuttoned it. Mr. Okafor had told him to leave it open when standing, buttoned only when seated. Then he looked at himself. The man in the mirror did not work in a basement. The man in the mirror did not carry a toolbox or wear a gray uniform with someone else's name on his chest. The man in the mirror looked like he owned something. Not a building or a company, but himself. Completely and without apology. Daddy? He turned. Amara was standing in the hallway, still in her park clothes, staring at him with her mouth open. Daddy? Is that you? It's me, baby girl. She walked toward him slowly, like she was approaching something she wasn't sure was real. She reached out and touched the sleeve of his jacket. You look like a movie star. Yeah? The most handsome movie star in the whole world. She looked up at him with absolute certainty. You're going to be the best person at that party, Daddy. Marcus knelt down and pulled her close. I already am, because I've got you. Dolores appeared behind Amara, and when she saw Marcus, she stopped. Her hand went to her chest. For a long moment she didn't speak, and Marcus saw her eyes glistening behind her glasses. Lord have mercy, she whispered. You look just like him. You look just like James. She crossed the room, reached up and straightened his tie, even though it didn't need straightening. Her hands lingered on his lapels. You come home to us, she said quietly. You hear me? No matter what happens in that room, you come home. Yes, ma'am. And Marcus? Yes? Don't you dare let them see you sweat. The car service Julian had arranged arrived at 7. A black sedan with tinted windows, the kind of car Marcus had only ever seen from the outside. The driver held the door open without a word, and Marcus slid into the back seat. The leather was soft. The air smelled like something expensive he couldn't name. The ride from the Bronx to Midtown took 35 minutes. Marcus spent it going over everything in his head. The charity's mission, the major donors, the conversation topics he'd prepared. But mostly, he just breathed. In and out. In and out. The way Lisa used to tell him to breathe before a job interview or a big exam. Your brain works better when you give it oxygen, baby. So breathe. The sedan pulled up to the Plaza Hotel at 7:40. Through the window, Marcus could see the red carpet, the photographers, the parade of beautiful people gliding toward the entrance like this was the most natural thing in the world. His phone buzzed. A text from Ray. "Go get him, King." Marcus put the phone in his pocket, exhaled one last time, and opened the door. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and straightened his jacket. The evening air hit his face, and for 1 second, just one, he felt the full weight of where he was and what he was about to do. A maintenance worker from the Bronx, standing on the red carpet of the most exclusive charity event in New York City, about to walk into a room full of people who'd invited him to fail. Then he thought about Amara's drawing. My daddy, the king. He started walking. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not total silence. There was still music from inside, still the murmur of conversation. But the people nearest to the entrance went quiet as he passed. A woman in a red gown stopped mid-sentence and stared. A man with silver hair turned to get a better look. A photographer raised his camera and fired off 3 shots without being asked. Marcus didn't pause. He didn't pose. He just walked. Shoulders back, chin level, stride unhurried. The way Mr. Okafor had told him. The way his grandmother had reminded him. Like a man with nothing to prove, but who proved it anyway. The doorman opened the heavy glass door. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the plaza." "Thank you," Marcus said, and his voice came out exactly the way he wanted it to. Calm, warm, and sure. Inside, a woman with a clipboard and headset was checking names. "Good evening. Your name, sir?" "Marcus King. I'm a guest of Julian Ashford." She scanned her list, looked up at him, and smiled. "Of course, Mr. King. Mr. Ashford's party is in the grand ballroom, straight ahead through those doors." Marcus thanked her and walked toward the ballroom entrance. He could hear the orchestra. He could feel the bass notes vibrating in his chest. Or maybe that was just his heart. He put his hand on the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The room was enormous and full of people, but Marcus didn't process any of that. What he processed was the shift, the subtle, unmistakable wave of attention that rippled outward from the entrance as people noticed him. It started with the nearest tables, then spread across the room like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Women looked. Men looked. Everyone looked. Marcus King stood 6'2" in a suit that fit him like a second skin, his dark complexion glowing under the warm light, his jawline sharp, his posture perfect, the gold lining of his jacket catching the light with every step. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine, not because he was pretending to be someone else, but because the suit had done exactly what Mr. Okafor said it would. It reminded him who he already was. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "I don't recognize him. Is he new money? God, he's stunning." Marcus kept walking. He scanned the room for Julian and found him near the bar, exactly where he expected him to be. Julian was holding a champagne glass, flanked by Preston, Derek, and Natalie. All 4 of them were facing the entrance, phones ready, smiles prepared, waiting for the show to begin. The show began, just not the way they expected. Julian saw Marcus first. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His smile collapsed. His eyes went wide with something Marcus had never seen in them before. Genuine, unfiltered shock. Preston turned to see what Julian was staring at, and his smirk evaporated like water on a hot skillet. Derek's jaw actually dropped. Natalie grabbed Julian's arm so hard she nearly spilled his drink. "That's not," Preston started. "That's him," Julian said quietly. Marcus reached them. He stopped at a comfortable distance, close enough to be respectful. far enough to maintain his own space. He looked at each of them in turn, letting the silence do the work. "Good evening, Mr. Ashford," he said. "Thank you again for the invitation." Julian opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. "Marcus, you look—" "Thank you. You said black tie. I wanted to make sure I got it right." Natalie was staring at him with an expression that flickered between disbelief and something that looked almost like fear. Preston was looking at his phone and then back at Marcus as if trying to reconcile the man in front of him with a maintenance worker in the gray uniform. "Can I get you a drink?" Julian asked, and there was something different in his voice now. The cruel confidence was gone. In its place was the uncertain tone of a man whose script had just been torn up. "Club soda with lime," Marcus said. "I want a clear head tonight." Julian flagged down a waiter and ordered the drink. While they waited, an uncomfortable silence settled over the group. Preston kept glancing at Derek. Natalie kept studying Marcus like she was looking for the seam in the costume, the flaw that would prove he was still just the janitor. She found nothing. "So, Marcus," Natalie said, her voice pitched to sound casual, "this is quite a transformation. I almost didn't recognize you without your tool belt." "I appreciate that, Natalie. Though I have to say, I clean up about as well as I fix HVAC systems. Which is to say, pretty well." The response was smooth and unbothered, and it landed like a quiet punch. Natalie's smile tightened. Before she could respond, a deep voice came from behind Marcus. "Julian, are you going to introduce me to your friend, or do I have to do it myself?" Marcus turned to see a tall, white-haired man in his late 60s extending his hand. He recognized the face from his research. David Ashford, Julian's uncle, co-founder of Ashford Industries, and the man who still controlled 40% of the company's stock. "Uncle David," Julian said quickly, "this is Marcus King. He works at the company. Marcus, this is David Ashford." "Mr. Ashford," Marcus shook his hand firmly. "It's an honor. I've read about the role you played in building the company's infrastructure division in the 90s. The modular approach you pioneered is still referenced in engineering programs." David Ashford's eyebrows rose. "You all familiar with our infrastructure work?" "I am. I study mechanical engineering at City College. Your early designs for scalable building systems are part of our curriculum." "Is that so?" David pulled out the chair next to him. "Sit down, young man. Tell me more." And just like that, Marcus King was seated at the most powerful table in the room, engaged in a technical conversation with the co-founder of a billion-dollar company, while Julian and his friends watched from the bar with expressions ranging from confused to horrified. The conversation with David Ashford lasted 20 minutes and covered everything from building automation to energy efficiency to the future of sustainable engineering. Marcus spoke with the confidence of someone who genuinely understood the material. Because he did. This wasn't performance. This was his passion. "You know," David said, leaning back in his chair, "our engineering team has been struggling with an efficiency problem on the upper floors. Energy loss through the HVAC system. They've been working on it for months." Marcus took a breath. This was the moment. "I know about that problem, sir. I actually submitted a proposal about it through the internal system 2 months ago." "You did?" "I never saw it." "I'm not surprised. Proposals from maintenance staff don't usually make it past the facilities manager's desk." David studied him. "What did your proposal suggest?" Marcus explained. The design flaw in the ductwork on floors 35 through 40. The pressure imbalance causing energy waste. His solution? A reconfiguration of the return air system that would cost approximately $180,000 to implement, but save the company over $2 million annually. David Ashford listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the older man was quiet for a long time. "That's the most elegant solution I've heard for that problem," David said. And you figured this out while working maintenance? I work on those systems every day, sir. I know them better than anyone in the building. I believe you do. David flagged down a waiter and ordered another whiskey. Young man, we need to continue this conversation. But right now, I think they're about to serve dinner. Will you join me at my table? Marcus was placed at table 2, the second most prominent table in the ballroom, reserved for the Ashford family's closest associates and most important donors. Julian's table. The same table where Preston, Derek, and Natalie were already seated. The looks on their faces when Marcus pulled out his chair and sat down were worth every penny of the emergency fund he hadn't spent, and every favor Ray had called in. Dinner was a test, and Marcus knew it. The multiple forks, the wine glasses, the formal service. He'd practiced, but practice and performance were different things. Still, he moved through each course with careful attention, watching the rhythm of the table, matching the pace of those around him, and never once reaching for the wrong utensil. Between the first and second course, Senator Williams, a black man in his 70s with kind eyes and a commanding presence, leaned across the table to address Marcus.
David tells me you're an engineering student. What drew you to the field? Honestly, Senator, necessity. When you grow up without much money, you learn to fix things yourself. I started taking apart appliances when I was 12, just to see how they worked. Turned out I had a knack for understanding systems, how pieces connect, where the weak points are, how to make something run better with limited resources. That sounds like a useful skill in more than just engineering. It is. It applies to buildings, to businesses, to communities. Most problems aren't caused by missing resources. They're caused by resources being in the wrong place. Senator Williams smiled. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need on our Education Advisory Committee. We're looking at how to implement STEM programs in underserved schools, and we need people who understand those communities from the inside. I actually run an informal tutoring program in my neighborhood, Marcus says. Nothing official, just me and a few kids from my building, working through math and science after school. My daughter participates too. Tell me more about that. And Marcus did. He talked about Amara's fascination with planets, about the 12-year-old in his building who had been failing math until Marcus started working with him twice a week and discovered the kid was actually gifted. He just couldn't see the blackboard. About the way children in his neighborhood were hungry for knowledge, but starved of opportunity. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was talking about the thing he cared about most in the world, and the passion in his voice made everyone at the table stop eating and listen. When the auction began after dinner, Marcus sat quietly through the first several items. A vacation package went for $40,000. A private concert for $60,000. Art, jewelry, experiences, all sold for amounts that could have changed Marcus's life 10 times over. Then the auctioneer announced the final item. A full STEM scholarship for a student from an underserved community, sponsored by the Ashford Foundation. We'll start the bidding at $10,000. The bidding climbed quickly. $15,000. $25,000. $35,000. Marcus watched the numbers rise and thought about the kids in his building, the ones who deserved every opportunity these donors' children took for granted. $50,000, someone called. $55,000. The auctioneer was about to close the bidding when Marcus did something he hadn't planned. He stood up. Every head in the room turned toward him. I can't outbid anyone in this room, Marcus said, and his voice carried clearly across the ballroom. I make $52,000 a year. My daughter and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. I don't have a trust fund, or a family business, or a stock portfolio. The room was so quiet, he could hear the ice settling in water glasses. But I know what that scholarship means because I'm living it. I work full-time and go to school at night. I study on the subway. I write papers at my kitchen table after my daughter falls asleep. And every day I show up,
Because I made a promise to my little girl that her father would be more than what the world expected him to be. He looked around the room, at the diamonds and the designer gowns and the champagne. That scholarship isn't just money. It's a message. It tells a kid from a neighborhood like mine that somebody sees them, that their brain matters, that they're not invisible. His voice caught just for a second, and he let it. My daughter is 6 years old. She drew me a picture last week. She drew me wearing a crown and wrote, "My Daddy the King." She doesn't know about student loans or double shifts or how tired I am at the end of the day. She just knows her daddy goes to work and then goes to school because he's building something better for her. Every kid in this city deserves someone building something better for them. He sat down. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then Senator Williams started clapping. Then David Ashford. Then the entire room. A standing ovation that rolled through the ballroom like thunder. The bidding exploded. $75,000. $100,000. $150,000. By the time the gavel came down, the scholarship had sold for $225,000, the largest single-item donation in the gala's history. Marcus sat in his chair, overwhelmed, while people around him patted his shoulder and shook his hand. David Ashford leaned over and said quietly, "That was the most powerful thing I've heard in 30 years of attending these events." Julian was watching from across the table. His face had changed over the course of the evening. The arrogance slowly stripped away, layer by layer, replaced by something raw and uncomfortable. Guilt, admiration, shame, all of it warring behind his eyes. After the auction, the orchestra resumed and couples moved onto the dance floor. Marcus was standing near the bar, collecting himself, when Natalie appeared beside him. "Quite a speech," she said. Her voice was different now, harder, more desperate. The evening had gone sideways, and she needed to put it back on track. "Very moving. Very calculated." "Excuse me?" "Come on, Marcus. We all know what this is. You show up in a nice suit, give a touching speech about your daughter, and suddenly everyone thinks you're some kind of hero. But when this night is over, you go back to fixing toilets, and we go back to our real lives. You know that, right?" Marcus turned to face her fully. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're right about one thing, Natalie. Tomorrow I do go back to fixing things. I go back to a job where I solve problems with my hands and my mind every single day. I go back to night school where I'm 6 months from an engineering degree. I go back to a daughter who thinks I'm a superhero. And I go back to a life that I built from nothing, with nobody's help, after I buried my wife and the whole world expected me to fall apart." He paused. "What do you go back to?" Natalie's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Because from where I'm standing," Marcus continued, "you go back to spending money you didn't earn, attending parties you didn't plan, and judging people you don't know. And the saddest part is, you'll do it all again next week and feel nothing. Because there's nothing behind the dress and the diamonds. There's just more emptiness." He said it without anger, without cruelty, just truth, delivered with the same calm precision he used when diagnosing a broken system. Natalie stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without a word. Marcus watched her go. His hands were shaking slightly. The adrenaline was still pumping. But his face was composed. He took a sip of his club soda and turned back toward the ballroom. Julian was standing 5 feet away. He'd heard everything. "Can we talk?" Julian said. Outside, they walked through the French doors onto a stone terrace overlooking Central Park. The noise of the gala faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of the city. Julian leaned against the railing and stared out at the darkness for a long time before speaking. "I need to tell you something, and I'm not going to dress it up." "You don't have to," Marcus said. "I already know." Julian turned to look at him. What do you mean? I was outside your conference room on Tuesday. I heard everything. The bet, the jokes, the comments about my wife's funeral. The blood drained from Julian's face. Marcus! I heard Preston call me the janitor with the mop. I heard Natalie laugh about Lisa. I heard Derek bet $20,000 that I'd leave within an hour. And I heard you say, "Fine, it'll be good for a laugh." Julian gripped the railing. He looked like a man who'd been punched in the stomach and was trying not to show it. Why did you come? If you knew, why didn't you just tell me to go to hell? Because my daughter drew me a picture. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Julian the photo he'd taken of Amara's drawing. The tall figure in black with a golden crown. The little girl beside him. My daddy, the king. She drew this the night I found out about your little joke. And I realized that if I stayed home, if I let your words keep me in the basement, then I'd be teaching her that people like us should stay in our place. And I can't teach her that. I won't. Julian stared at the drawing on the phone screen. His jaw was tight, and Marcus could see the muscles working as he fought to control whatever was happening inside him. I'm sorry, Julian said. His voice cracked on the second word. I'm sorry for what I said, for what they said, for all of it. There's no excuse. I was cruel, and you didn't deserve any of it. No, I didn't. You know what the worst part is? I've worked with you for 2 years. You've kept my building running. You've shown up every single day, and I never once asked you your daughter's name. Her name is Amara. Amara. Julian repeated it, like he was testing the weight of it. That's a beautiful name. It means grace in several African languages. Her mother chose it. They stood in silence for a while. The sounds of the gala drifted through the open doors. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. 2 worlds separated by a pane of glass. Your uncle offered to look at my HVAC proposal, Marcus said. He mentioned that. He was impressed. I didn't come here to impress anyone, Mr. Ashford. I came here because I refuse to be invisible. Not to you, not to your friends, not to anyone. Before Julian could respond, the terrace door burst open. Preston stumbled out, champagne sloshing over the rim of his glass, his face flushed and his eyes bright with the reckless energy of a man who'd had too much to drink and not enough attention. There you are, Preston said loudly. Julian, what are you doing out here with the help? The party's inside. And speaking of inside, everyone in there seems to think your maintenance man is some kind of genius. Should we tell them the truth? Should we tell them about the bet? Preston, stop, Julian said sharply. Why? It was your idea. You invited him as a joke, remember? We all placed bets. $10,000 each. And now everyone's treating him like he's Obama at a fundraiser. It's ridiculous. Preston turned to Marcus with a sloppy grin. No offense, buddy. You did great tonight, really. Standing ovation. Big speech about your kid. Very touching. But let's be honest. Tomorrow, you go back to the basement, and we go back to... Enough. Julian's voice cut through the night air like a blade. That's enough, Preston. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you've actually gone soft on... I said enough. Julian stepped forward, and something in his posture made Preston take a step back. Go inside. Sober up. And if you say one more word to Marcus, or about Marcus, for the rest of the night, our friendship is over. Do you understand me? Preston blinked. The grin faded. He looked at Julian, then at Marcus, then back at Julian. Something he saw in Julian's face must have convinced him this wasn't a bluff, because he set his champagne glass on the railing and walked back inside without another word. Julian and Marcus stood alone on the terrace again. That's a start, Marcus said quietly. It's not enough, Julian replied. Not nearly enough. No, Marcus agreed. But it's a start. They went back inside together. The gala was winding down, couples swaying on the dance floor, conversations growing softer and more intimate as the evening faded.
Marcus moved through the room one final time, shaking hands with the people he'd met, exchanging cards with Senator Williams and two other officials who wanted to discuss education initiatives. David Ashford caught him near the exit. Marcus, I want you in my office Monday morning. Not the maintenance office, my office. 41st floor, 9 a.m. I'll be there, sir. And bring that HVAC proposal, the real one, with the full engineering analysis. Yes, sir. David shook his hand with both of his. You did something rare tonight, young man. You walked into a room that wasn't built for you and made everyone in it better for having met you. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Marcus thanked him and walked out of the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. He collected his coat from the attendant, stepped through the lobby, and pushed through the heavy glass doors into the cool night air. The red carpet was empty now. The photographers were gone. The sidewalk was quiet, except for the sound of taxis and the distant rhythm of the city that never sleeps. Marcus stood there for a moment, alone, under the lights of the plaza. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Amara's drawing glowed on the screen. He texted Ray. It's done. Ray replied in 3 seconds. How bad did they take it? Marcus smiled, the first real smile since he'd walked into the building. They never saw it coming. The car brought Marcus home just after midnight. The apartment was dark, except for the kitchen light Dolores always left on, and the soft blue glow from Amara's nightlight leaking under her bedroom door. He hung the jacket carefully on the back of a chair, loosened his tie, and sat down at the kitchen table. His hands were still trembling, not from fear anymore, from the release of it. The adrenaline that had carried him through 6 hours of standing tall in a room built to make him feel small was finally draining out of his body. And what it left behind was an exhaustion so deep it felt like it lived in his bones. Dolores appeared in the hallway in her bathrobe, her glasses perched on her nose. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, her grandson, sitting at the kitchen table in a suit that James King would have approved of, with tears running silently down his face. She pulled out the chair next to him and sat down. She took his hand. Tell me, she said. So he told her. Everything. The way the room went quiet when he walked in, the conversation with David Ashford, the speech during the auction, Natalie's cruelty and his response, the confrontation with Preston on the terrace, Julian's apology. All of it poured out of him in the small kitchen, while the refrigerator hummed and Amara's drawing watched from its place of honor on the door. When he finished, Dolores was quiet for a long time. Then she squeezed his hand. Your grandfather would have been so proud of you tonight. And your Lisa. Her voice broke on the name. Oh, baby, Lisa would have been so proud. Marcus pressed his grandmother's hand against his forehead and cried. Not the quiet tears from before. Real crying. The kind he hadn't allowed himself since the funeral. He cried for the humiliation of being treated like a joke. He cried for the pride of proving them wrong. He cried for his wife, who should have been there to see it. And he cried for Amara, who would never know how close her father came to staying in the basement where they wanted him. Dolores held him until it passed. Then she stood up, kissed the top of his head, and said, Get some sleep. You've got a big week ahead. She was right, though neither of them knew yet just how big. Sunday morning started normally enough. Marcus made breakfast, took Amara to church with Dolores, and spent the afternoon helping her with a school project about the solar system. He'd almost managed to convince himself that the gala was behind him, a single extraordinary night in an otherwise ordinary life, when his phone started buzzing. First it was Ray. Brother, you need to check Twitter right now. I don't have Twitter.
Then check any social media, any news site. Just look. Marcus opened his phone's browser and typed in Ashford Gala. The results loaded, and he stopped breathing. Someone at the gala had recorded his speech during the auction. Not just a clip, the whole thing. The video was everywhere. It had been posted Saturday night and had already been shared over 200,000 times. The headline on one site read, "Mystery guest's emotional speech steals the show at Ashford Gala." Another said, "Single father's words move billionaire crowd to record donation." But it wasn't just the speech. Someone had also recorded Preston's confrontation on the terrace, or at least part of it. The audio was muffled, but Preston's voice was clearly audible saying, "The help," and "It was your idea," and "We all placed bets." A gossip site had already put the pieces together, with a headline that made Marcus's stomach drop. Ashford heir allegedly invited employee to exclusive gala as cruel bet. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. King, this is Diana Walsh from the New York Post. We're running a story about last night's event, and we'd love to get your comment on—" Marcus hung up. The phone rang again. Different number. "Marcus King, this is a producer at Good Morning America. We saw the video of your speech and—" He hung up again. His phone buzzed with texts, calls, emails, a flood of attention from a world that hadn't known he existed 24 hours ago. Ray called again. "Marcus, this thing is blowing up. CNN just played the video. The View is talking about it. You're trending #1 nationwide. I don't want any of this. I know you don't, but it's happening. So you need to decide how you're going to handle it." Before Marcus could answer, another call came through. This time, he recognized the number. It was Julian Ashford. He picked up. "Marcus." Julian's voice was tight, controlled, but Marcus could hear the strain underneath. "I assume you've seen what's happening online?" "I've seen it. I need to talk to you. In person. Can you meet me?" "Where?" "There's a coffee shop on 135th and Amsterdam. Small place. Quiet. I can be there in an hour." Marcus almost said no. He almost said that whatever Julian needed to say could wait until Monday, or never. But something in Julian's voice, a rawness that hadn't been there before, not even on the terrace, made him pause. "1 hour," Marcus said. "And Julian? Come alone." The coffee shop was half empty on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus arrived first, still wearing jeans and a sweatshirt from church, and ordered a black coffee. He chose a table in the back corner where they wouldn't be overheard. Julian walked in 12 minutes later. He was wearing clothes Marcus had never seen on him before. Not the tailored suits or the designer casual wear, but a plain gray hoodie and dark jeans. No watch, no product in his hair. He looked younger and smaller and deeply uncomfortable, like a man who'd been stripped of his armor and didn't know how to stand without it. He sat down across from Marcus without ordering anything. "Before you say anything," Marcus said, "I want you to know that I didn't record that video. I didn't post anything online. I didn't talk to any reporters." "I know. It was someone at the event. Probably multiple people. My PR team is trying to manage it, but—" Julian shook his head. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" Julian looked down at the table. His hands were clasped together, knuckles white. "I was up all night. After the gala, after Preston, after everything. I went home and I sat in my apartment and I tried to figure out when I became this person. This person who invites a good man to a party so his friends can laugh at him. This person who bets money on someone else's humiliation. This person who walks past a man every single day for 2 years and never bothers to learn that he's raising a daughter alone while getting an engineering degree." His voice was steady, but Marcus could see the effort it was costing him. And the answer I kept coming back to, Julian continued, is that I've always been this person. My whole life, I've been surrounded by people like Preston and Natalie and Derek. People who measure everyone by their bank account and treat anyone below a certain net worth like they're furniture. And I never questioned it. I never pushed back. I just went along with it because it was easier than standing up.
So what changed? Marcus asked.
You did. Julian looked up. His eyes were red. Last night, when you stood up and gave that speech, when you talked about your daughter and the kids in your building and what that scholarship meant, I looked around the room and every single person was listening to you. Not because you were rich or powerful or connected, because you were real. You were the most real person in that room, and everyone could feel it. He paused, swallowing hard. And then I thought about what I am, what my friends are, and I realized that we're not real. We're just expensive costumes walking around pretending to be people. We don't create anything. We don't build anything. We don't sacrifice anything. We just consume and judge and laugh at anyone who reminds us of how empty we are. Marcus sat with that for a moment. The coffee shop was quiet around them. A barista was steaming milk behind the counter. Outside, a bus rumbled past.
That's a good speech, Marcus said. But speeches are easy. What are you actually going to do?
Julian nodded like he'd expected the question. First, I called Preston this morning and told him our friendship is over. Same with Derek. They both thought I was joking. I wasn't. Natalie called me 20 minutes ago, screaming about the video and blaming you for ruining her reputation. I hung up on her. That's a start. Second, I talked to my uncle. David wants to see you Monday morning. I'm guessing he already told you. He did. He's going to offer you a position in the engineering department, a real position, with a real salary, based on your qualifications. I want you to know that I didn't arrange that. David made that decision on his own after talking to you for 20 minutes. He said you're the most impressive engineer he's met in years. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A loosening of something he'd been holding tight for a very long time.
And what's the third thing?
Julian reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a check. He slid it across the table. Marcus looked at it. The number had 6 figures. What is this? It's the money from the bet. $50,000. $10,000 each from me, Preston, Derek, Natalie, and Chelsea Langston, who wasn't at the gala, but was in on it from the beginning. I collected it this morning. Every penny. Marcus stared at the check. I don't want your money. It's not for you. It's for your tutoring program. The kids in your building. You said last night that every kid deserves someone building something better for them. So build it. Use this money to start a real program, a registered nonprofit with funding and resources and a future. Marcus pushed the check back across the table. Julian, I can't accept money that came from a bet about whether I'd embarrass myself. That's exactly why you should accept, because the best possible ending for that money is for it to go to something good. Something those 5 people would never have funded on their own. Let their cruelty become something beautiful. That's the best revenge I can think of. Marcus looked at the check for a long time. He thought about the 12-year-old in his building who needed glasses, about Amara's classmates who didn't have books at home, about every kid in the South Bronx who'd ever been told, by words or by silence, that they didn't matter. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of 2 men figuring out whether they could build something on the wreckage of what had come before. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Anything. Why me? There are hundreds of employees at Ashford Industries. Why did Preston pick me for the joke? Julian's jaw tightened. Because you're the most visible person in the building who doesn't look like us. You walk through every floor, every day. You interact with everyone. And you do it with a kind of quiet dignity that, I'm ashamed to say this, made people like Preston uncomfortable. You reminded them that their world isn't the only world. And instead of examining why that bothered them, they decided to make you the punchline. Marcus absorbed that. It wasn't a surprise, but hearing it said aloud still hurt in a way he hadn't expected. I need to get home, Marcus said, standing up. My daughter's waiting. Of course. Julian stood too. He extended his hand. Monday morning, David's office, 41st floor. Marcus looked at the hand. He thought about everything that hand represented. The invitation that was meant to destroy him. The casual cruelty. The bet. The laughter. But he also thought about the apology on the terrace. About Preston being sent away. About the check on the table. He shook Julian's hand. Monday morning. Walking home from the subway, Marcus called Ray. How'd it go? Ray asked. He apologized, for real this time, and he gave me a check for $50,000 from the bet money. Wants me to use it for the tutoring program. Ray was quiet for a beat. Are you going to take it? I don't know yet. You know what your grandmother would say? She'd say, don't let pride get in the way of purpose. Exactly. Marcus unlocked the apartment door to find Amara waiting for him, with her hands behind her back and the suspicious grin on her face. Daddy, close your eyes. Amara, what? Close your eyes. He closed them. He felt her small hands grab his and lead him into the kitchen. Okay, open. He opened his eyes. The kitchen table was covered with drawings, at least 20 of them. Amara had spent the afternoon drawing pictures of Marcus at the gala. Marcus in his suit, Marcus dancing, Marcus talking to people, Marcus standing on a stage. In every single picture, he was wearing a golden crown. I made you an art show, Amara announced proudly, because you went to a fancy party and you were the best one there. Grandma told me. Marcus looked at Dolores, who was standing by the stove with her arms crossed and tears in her eyes. I told her the truth, Dolores said. Her daddy went to a party where some people weren't very nice, and he handled it with grace and strength. That's all she needs to know. Marcus knelt down and looked at each drawing carefully, telling Amara what he loved about every one. She beamed and explained the details. This one was him talking to the important man. That one was him giving a speech. This one was him being so handsome that everyone stared. This is the best art show I've ever been to, he said. Better than the fancy party? 1,000,000 times better. Monday morning came, and Marcus put on khaki pants, a clean button-down shirt, and the same work boots he wore every day. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He'd done that Saturday night. Today was about substance. He rode the elevator past the basement, past the maintenance office, past all the floors he'd serviced for 2 years, and stepped out on the 41st floor for the first time in his life. David Ashford's office was at the end of the hall. His assistant, a young woman who had walked past Marcus 1,000 times without ever making eye contact, looked up in confusion when he approached. Can I help you? Marcus King, I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Ashford. She checked her screen, and her eyes widened slightly. Of course. Please, go right in. David was sitting behind a massive desk covered with engineering blueprints and financial reports. He stood when Marcus entered and shook his hand warmly. Sit down, Marcus. Coffee? Black, please. David poured 2 cups from a carafe and settled back into his chair. I'll get straight to the point. I spent yesterday reviewing your HVAC proposal. I also pulled your maintenance records, your employee evaluations, and your academic transcripts from City College. Marcus sat very still. Your proposal is brilliant. Not just good, brilliant. The engineering team spent 4 months studying that problem and couldn't find a workable solution. You solved it on a napkin in the maintenance room. Your professors describe you as one of the most naturally gifted systems engineers they've taught. And your maintenance record is flawless. Not a single missed day in 2 years. Thank you, sir. I'm offering you a position as a junior engineer in our building systems division. The salary is $95,000 to start, with full benefits and tuition reimbursement for the remainder of your degree. You'd report to the head of engineering, not to Julian, so there's no conflict of interest. And the position is based entirely on merit. I don't do favors, and I don't do charity.
Marcus felt the number land in his chest. $95,000. Nearly double what he was making now. Enough to move Amara to a better school district. Enough to stop worrying about medical bills. Enough to breathe. There's one condition, David continued. I want you to present your HVAC proposal to the full engineering team this Friday. If they approve the implementation, and I believe they will, you'll lead the project. That means managing a team of engineers who've been doing this work for 20 years. Some of them won't like taking direction from a former maintenance worker. Can you handle that? Mr. Ashford, I've been handling people who don't think I belong in their space for 32 years. I can handle a few engineers. David smiled. I thought you'd say that. Welcome to the 41st floor, Marcus. They shook hands. Marcus walked out of the office and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the reality settle over him. He could see the elevator at the end of the hall. The same elevator he'd ridden to the basement every morning for 2 years. The same elevator that separated the world above from the world below. He took out his phone and called Dolores. She picked up on the first ring. Well? $95,000, Grandma. Junior engineer. Starting immediately. Silence. Then a sound that might have been a sob, or might have been a laugh. Lord Jesus. Oh, Lord Jesus. Can you put Amara on the phone? Shuffling. Then that little voice, bright as morning. Hi, Daddy. Hey, baby girl. Guess what? What? Daddy got a new job. A really good one. I'm going to be an engineer. Like the people who build bridges? Like the people who build everything. Daddy, does this mean we're not poor anymore? Marcus closed his eyes. The question that had haunted him for weeks. The question that had started all of this. And now he had a different answer. Baby, we were never poor. We just hadn't been given our chance yet. And now we have it. Can we celebrate with ice cream? We can celebrate with anything you want. He hung up and stood in the hallway of the 41st floor, looking out the window at the city stretching below him. Somewhere down there was the Bronx. Somewhere down there was a 2-bedroom apartment with a drawing on the refrigerator. Somewhere down there was a life that was about to change. Marcus took the check out of his wallet, the one Julian had given him at the coffee shop. He'd been carrying it since yesterday, not sure what to do with it. But standing here, looking out at the city that had given him everything and nothing, he made his decision. He would take the money, not for himself, for the kids. He would build the program he'd been dreaming about since he started tutoring in his living room. He would make it real, a proper nonprofit with a proper name and proper funding. He would call it King's Kids. Because if a maintenance man from the Bronx could walk into a ballroom full of billionaires and make them stand up and applaud, then a 12-year-old with bad eyesight and a gift for mathematics could do anything. Marcus folded the check, put it back in his wallet, and walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. He had glasses to buy for a kid who couldn't see the blackboard, and he didn't want to waste another minute. The glasses cost $47. Marcus picked them up from the optometrist on Tuesday afternoon and brought them to the apartment on the 4th floor of his building, where 12-year-old Deshaun Miller was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to do homework. Deshaun's mother opened the door with a tired smile.
She worked nights at a nursing home and slept in 3-hour shifts during the day. "Marcus, you didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." Marcus handed the case to Deshawn. "Put them on."
Deshawn opened the case, pulled out the glasses, and slid them onto his face. He blinked. He looked at his textbook. He blinked again. "I can see the words," Deshawn said quietly. "Like, all of them. They're not fuzzy." "That's the idea." Deshawn looked up at Marcus, and his eyes, magnified now behind the lenses, were wide with something Marcus recognized. It was the same look Amara got when she discovered something new about the world. Wonder. Pure, uncomplicated wonder. "Mr. King, I can see the words." "I know, son. Now let's see if you can solve the problems, too. Open to Chapter 7. That was how King's Kids started. Not with a press conference or a ribbon cutting or a fancy launch event. It started with a pair of glasses and a kitchen table, and a man who refused to wait for permission to help. Within a week, Marcus had filed the paperwork to register King's Kids STEM Lab as a non-profit. He deposited Julian's $50,000 check into the organization's account and immediately began spending it where it mattered. Supplies, books, a second-hand laptop for Deshawn, tutoring materials, and a folding table for the community room in the basement of his building that the landlord let him use for free. "It's not much," Marcus told Ray as they set up the room on a Saturday morning. "But it's a start. Brother, you started a revolution in a ballroom with nothing but a speech. You can start a school in a basement with a folding table." By the end of the first month, Marcus had 7 students. By the end of the second, he had 14. Word spread the way it always does in tight-knit neighborhoods, through mothers talking at the laundromat, through kids bragging to their friends, through a handwritten flyer Marcus taped to the bulletin board at the bodega on the corner. The program was simple. 3 evenings a week, Marcus and 2 volunteer tutors, college students from City College who he'd recruited, worked with kids from the neighborhood on math, science, and basic engineering concepts. They built model bridges out of popsicle sticks. They learned to code using free online platforms. They took apart broken electronics and put them back together. And every session started with the same question Marcus asked each student. "What did you learn today that you didn't know yesterday?" Meanwhile, at Ashford Industries, Marcus's life had transformed in ways he was still processing. The HVAC presentation on Friday had gone exactly as David Ashford predicted. Marcus walked into a room full of senior engineers who looked at him with barely concealed skepticism. A former maintenance worker telling them how to do their jobs, and presented his proposal with the same calm confidence he'd shown at the gala. The questions were aggressive at first. Technical challenges, implementation costs, risk assessments. Marcus answered every one of them, not because he'd memorized talking points, but because he understood the systems at a molecular level. He'd spent 2 years inside the walls and ceilings of that building. He knew where every pipe ran, where every duct connected, where every kilowatt of energy was being wasted. By the end of the presentation, the lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had initially been the most skeptical voice in the room, stood up and said, "This is the most practical and well-researched efficiency proposal I've seen in 15 years at this company. I recommend immediate implementation." The room voted unanimously to approve. Marcus would lead the project. He called Dolores from the hallway afterward. "They said yes, Grandma." "Of course they did. You're James King's grandson. Now come home. Amara made you a congratulations card, and she's been sitting by the door for an hour." The months that followed were the hardest and best of Marcus's life. He was working full days as a junior engineer, attending night classes to finish his degree, running King's Kids 3 evenings a week, and raising Amara in whatever hours were left. Sleep became a luxury. Meals became something he ate standing up or in the car between commitments.
There were nights when he sat at the kitchen table at 1 in the morning, grading Deshawn's algebra homework with one hand and writing his own engineering thesis with the other, and wondered if he was going to collapse. But every morning, Amara would climb into his lap at breakfast and say, "Good morning, Daddy King," and the exhaustion would fade just enough for him to keep going. Julian, to his credit, didn't disappear after the coffee shop conversation. He showed up at King's Kids one Tuesday evening without warning, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and asked Marcus what he could do to help. "You can start by handing out those worksheets," Marcus said, pointing to a stack on the folding table. Julian looked at the worksheets, then at the room full of kids from the South Bronx, who were staring at him with open curiosity, and nodded. He handed out worksheets. Then he helped a 9-year-old named Maria with her long division. Then he sat on the floor with 3 boys who were building a bridge out of cardboard and tape, and asked them to explain the engineering principles behind their design. He came back the next week, and the week after that. "You don't have to keep doing this," Marcus told him one evening, as they folded up chairs after the kids had gone home. "I know I don't have to. I want to." "Why?" Julian stacked the last chair against the wall. "Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually doing something that matters. Not signing checks, not attending galas, actually sitting on the floor with a kid and watching her understand fractions for the first time. That's real. Everything else I've been doing is just noise." Marcus studied him. The man standing in front of him looked different from the one who had sat in that conference room, laughing about the maintenance guy with the mop. Not physically. Julian still had the same face, the same posture, the same expensive haircut. But something behind his eyes had shifted. The coldness was gone. In its place was something fragile and new, like a plant pushing through concrete. "You know people are going to talk," Marcus said. "The billionaire volunteering in the Bronx. They'll say you're doing it for PR, for redemption, to make yourself look good after the video. Let them talk. And your friends? The ones you still have? Alex Chen is the only one who matters, and he's been telling me to do something like this for years. The rest of them can think whatever they want. I'm done living for their approval." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then I'll see you next Tuesday." Next Tuesday. The video from the gala continued to ripple outward in ways Marcus couldn't control and didn't try to. A documentary filmmaker reached out about telling Marcus's story. He said no. 3 companies offered him sponsorship deals for King's Kids. He said no to the ones with strings attached and yes to the one that simply wanted to donate supplies. A literary agent called about a book deal. He said not yet. What he did say yes to was Senator Williams's invitation to join the Advisory Committee on Education Reform. Marcus took the train to Washington, D.C. on a Thursday, wearing his Ashford Industries badge and Mr. Okafor's suit, and sat in a Senate hearing room with education experts, policy analysts, and government officials who listened to his testimony about what STEM education looked like from the ground level. "With all respect to the research and the data," Marcus told the committee, "I can tell you what works because I see it every Tuesday and Thursday evening in a basement in the Bronx. What works is showing up. What works is looking a kid in the eye and telling them they're smart enough. What works is a pair of $47 glasses for a boy who couldn't see the blackboard. You can fund 1,000 programs, but if there's no one on the ground who believes in those kids, the money is just paper." The testimony was entered into the congressional record. Senator Williams cited it in his education reform bill 3 months later. 6 months after the gala, Marcus graduated from City College with a degree in mechanical engineering. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon in May, and he walked across the stage in his cap and gown, with Amara's voice cutting through the applause like a bell. "That's my daddy! That's my daddy the king!" The audience laughed. Marcus laughed. Dolores, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face, didn't laugh. She just clapped harder than anyone in the building. Ray was there, sitting 3 rows back, wearing his best shirt and taking video on his phone. Mr. Okafor had come too, sitting quietly in the corner with his arms folded and a look of deep satisfaction on his face. And Julian was in the back row, alone, clapping with both hands. After the ceremony, Marcus found Julian in the crowd. "You came," Marcus said. "Wouldn't have missed it. You know, a year ago you didn't know my daughter's name." Julian smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried weight. "A year ago, I didn't know my own name. Not really. You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything. I just showed up." "That's the same thing, Marcus. That's exactly the same thing." David Ashford called Marcus into his office the following Monday. The HVAC project had been completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $40,000 under budget. The energy savings in the first quarter alone exceeded projections by 15%. "I'm promoting you," David said without preamble. "Senior Engineer, Building Systems Division, $135,000, plus project bonuses. You'll have your own team." Marcus sat in the chair across from David's desk and let the number wash over him. $135,000. A year ago, he'd been making $52,000 and counting every dollar. "There's something else," David continued. "The board has approved a corporate partnership with King's Kids. Ashford Industries will provide $200,000 in annual funding, plus equipment, mentorship from our engineering staff, and scholarship opportunities for your top students." Julian proposed it. The board approved it unanimously. Julian proposed it? He presented a full business case, said it was the most important initiative the company had ever undertaken. "I don't know what happened between you two, but whatever it is, it turned my nephew into someone I actually respect." Marcus thought about the conference room, about the laughter, about $10,000 says he doesn't even own a suit. And then he thought about Julian, sitting on the floor of a basement in the Bronx, helping a 9-year-old girl understand fractions. "People can change," Marcus said. "Some people. The ones who are brave enough to look in the mirror and hate what they see." That evening, Marcus went home and cooked dinner. Spaghetti, Amara's favorite. The 3 of them sat at the kitchen table the way they did every night, and Marcus told Dolores and Amara about the promotion and the partnership. Amara processed the information with the seriousness of a boardroom executive. "Does this mean King's Kids gets more stuff?" "A lot more stuff." "Like real computers? Not the old one that's slow?" "Real computers." "And books? Deshaun said he wants more books about space." "All the books Deshaun wants." "And can we get a bigger table? Because last week there were too many kids and some of them had to sit on the floor." Marcus looked at his daughter, 7 years old now, a full year older than the night he'd stood in a hallway and listened to billionaires laugh at him. She was taller, smarter, more certain of her place in the world than most adults he knew. "We'll get a bigger table," he said. "Good." Amara twirled spaghetti around her fork. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Remember when I asked if we were poor?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I remember." "I don't think we're poor anymore. But I don't think we were ever really poor. I think we were just waiting for the world to catch up to us." Marcus stared at his daughter. Dolores set down her fork and pressed her napkin to her eyes. "Where did you hear that, baby?" "I made it up. Is it good?" "It's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." 1 year to the day after the Ashford Gala, Marcus stood in front of a different kind of crowd. Not billionaires in tuxedos and designer gowns, but kids in sneakers and hoodies, parents in work uniforms, teachers and volunteers and neighbors who had shown up to celebrate the grand opening of the King's Kids STEM Learning Center. It wasn't in a basement anymore. The program had outgrown the folding table and the community room 6 months ago. With the Ashford Partnership, Senator Williams's legislative support, and donations that had poured in from across the country after the gala video went viral, Marcus had secured a permanent space. a renovated storefront on the same block where he'd grown up. 3 subway stops from the building where he'd once carried a toolbox and been invisible. The ribbon cutting was simple. No red carpet, no champagne. Just Marcus, Amara, Dolores, Ray, Mr. Okafor, and 50 kids who were about to walk into a room full of computers, books, and possibilities that hadn't existed for them 12 months ago. Julian stood in the back of the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching. He'd funded the renovation personally, but insisted his name appear nowhere on the building. "This is your legacy," he'd told Marcus, "not mine." Deshaun Miller, now 13 and wearing his glasses, was standing next to Marcus at the front door. He'd been Marcus's first student and was now his unofficial teaching assistant, helping younger kids with their math the same way Marcus had helped him. "You ready?" Marcus asked him. "Born ready, Mr. King." Marcus smiled and turned to face the crowd. He didn't have a prepared speech. He never did. He just spoke from the place where truth lived. "A year ago, I was invited to a party by people who thought I was a joke. They bet money on whether I'd embarrass myself. They laughed about my clothes, my job, my life. And when I walked into that room, every single one of them expected me to prove that I didn't belong." He paused and looked at the kids in front of him. But here's what they didn't understand. Belonging isn't something anyone can give you or take away. It's something you decide. You decide you belong, and then you show up. That's the whole secret. You show up, you stand tall, and you do the work. Not to prove anything to them, to prove it to yourself. He put his hand on Deshaun's shoulder. Every kid standing here today is smarter than they've been told, braver than they feel, and more capable than anyone expects. I know that because a year ago I was the same way. I was a man with a toolbox and a dream, and the world told me that wasn't enough. But it was. It was always enough. I just needed a chance to prove it. He looked at Amara, who was standing with Dolores, holding her grandmother's hand. She was wearing a t-shirt that Dolores had made for her, white, with gold letters that read, "King's Kids." "This center isn't named after me," Marcus said. "It's named after my grandfather, James King, who was a tailor in Selma, Alabama, and who taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by what he builds. It's named after my wife, Lisa, who told me to never stop fighting. And it's named after my daughter, who drew me a picture of a man wearing a crown, and reminded me who I was when the world was trying to tell me I was nobody." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original drawing, the one Amara had made the night he found out about the bet. It was wrinkled now, the crayon faded, the edges soft from being carried and unfolded, and looked at 100 times in 100 different moments when Marcus needed to remember why he kept going. He held it up so the crowd could see it, the tall figure in black with the golden crown, the little girl beside him, the words at the bottom in wobbly first-grade handwriting. "My daddy, the king." "This is the most valuable thing I own," Marcus said. "Not because it's art, because it's the truth. Every child here has a truth like this inside them. Our job is to help them find it." He turned to Deshaun. "You want to do the honors?" Deshaun grinned, picked up the oversized scissors, and cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Kids poured through the door. Parents wiped their eyes. Dolores held Amara tight and whispered something into her hair that nobody else could hear. Ray appeared at Marcus's side. "Not bad for a maintenance man from the Bronx." "Former maintenance man." "Right, senior engineer. My mistake." Ray grinned. "Lisa would be proud of you, brother. You know that, right?" "I know." "And your grandfather?" Marcus looked at the building, the freshly painted walls, the bright windows, the sign above the door that read, "King's Kids STEM Learning Center," in gold letters. He thought about James King's shop in Selma, about the measuring tape and the steady hands and the belief that a man could build dignity with a needle and thread. "He'd say the suit fits," Marcus replied. That night, after the celebration was over and the last volunteer had gone home, Marcus sat in the new center alone. The computers were dark. The chairs were pushed in. The books were lined up on shelves that still smelled like fresh paint. His phone rang. Julian. "How was the opening?" "Everything I hoped it would be. David said he wants to expand the partnership to 3 more locations by next year. He's already talking to the board." "Tell him I said thank you." "I will." A pause. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "I never told you this, but after the gala, after everything came out, Preston and Natalie and Derek tried to get me to sue you. They said you'd engineered the whole thing for publicity. They wanted to discredit you, bury the video, protect our reputations." "What did you say?" "I said that the only reputation worth protecting was the one I hadn't built yet. And then I went to a coffee shop in Harlem and asked a man I'd wronged if he'd let me try to be better." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You've been better, Julian." "I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do." After hanging up, Marcus locked the center and walked to the subway. The train was mostly empty at this hour. A few night shift workers, a couple of teenagers with headphones, an old man sleeping in the corner seat. Marcus sat by the window and watched the city blur past in streaks of light and darkness. He thought about the hallway on the 40th floor where he'd heard the laughter. He thought about the basement where he'd sat with his head in his hands. He thought about Mr. Okafor's shop and the gold lining and the way the suit had felt like armor. He thought about standing in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel while every eye in the room tried to figure out who he was. But mostly, he thought about the subway. This subway. The same train he'd ridden every day for years, to work, to school, to the hospital when Amara had the flu, to the cemetery where Lisa was buried. This train had carried him through the lowest moments of his life, and the highest, and it didn't know the difference. It just moved forward, stop after stop, the same way Marcus had moved forward, through everything that tried to hold him back. He got off at his stop and walked the 3 blocks home. The apartment was quiet. Dolores had left the kitchen light on, the way she always did. Marcus hung up his jacket and walked to the refrigerator. Amara's drawing was still there, the original, the one from a year ago, pinned in the center with a magnet shaped like a star. The crayon was faded, the paper was soft, but the image was the same, a tall man in black with a golden crown, a little girl holding his hand, and 3 words that had carried Marcus King through the hardest year of his life. Next to it, held up by a new magnet, was a drawing Amara had made that afternoon at the opening ceremony. It was the same scene, Marcus and Amara, hand in hand. But this time, there were other figures surrounding them, small ones, dozens of them, kids with books and computers and smiles. At the bottom, in handwriting that was steadier and more confident than it had been a year ago, Amara had written something new. "My daddy the king and all his kids." Marcus touched the edge of the paper. He stood